Season 5 is coming out soon to our screens, so I wanted to keep on recapping on the series, so here is Season 4. We last saw Joe leave the States to begin his new life away from love. Suburbia was excessive and a lot, and while we felt that Season 4 would have been spent in Paris, we rather saw that his excursion to find Marianne drove him to London, where he had the option to begin his new life as Professor Jonathan Moore, with him blending in with the elite class of the UK. This was a world that was most certainly strange to Joe, however a killer and stalker was among him, and for once it wasn't Joe that was the troublemaker. So how about we recap, break down and make sense of all that there was for detract from this initial segment of Season 4. So we should get into it. This video will contain spoilers. So this season opened up with Joe carrying on with his new life as a Professor Jonathan Moore in London, where he needed to get his past behind him and have the option to reside under another false name. In any case, we saw seldom on that it wasn't initially by decision that he did this. He went on his excursion to Europe in the wake of surrendering his child and outlining his wife's love for his murder, to track down Marianne and admit his adoration for her, which he figured she would appreciate and respond back, yet that wasn't true. In the wake of going to Paris and figuring out that she was in London, he went there and found her, when he then enlightened her beginning and end regarding love and why he did it. This was the kind of thing that we saw put Marianne off of Joe straight away and eventually drove him to not kill her. Let her leave. He even did likewise when was defied by a contract killer that Love's family had employed to kill him. However, rather he cut and deal to get Love's savings, yet it implied that he needed to kill Marianne, as she knew about Joe's real identity. Nonetheless, very much like we saw minutes sooner, he let Marianne go in light of the fact that he saw that she saw him as a beast, and he was unable to stand the trepidation that was in her eyes when she viewed him. Joe really cared for her more than we've seen him care about anyone previously. More than Beck, more than Candace, more than Love, as he didn't let any of them live. The identity papers that were given to him were for Jonathan Moore, and this was the justification for why he stayed in London and turned into a teacher of writing. I feel we're most certainly going to see the choice on allowing Marianne to get by and return to get Joe. It was made a fundamental spotlight so from the beginning, and I figure it could wind up bringing out some attention to him. As the initial 5 episodes of the season went on, we saw that Joe, rather than being a stalker and the executioner like we've come to be aware and see throughout the past 3 seasons, we rather saw Joe being followed and watched by a baffling individual. Professor Malcolm Harding was the first individual to be killed out of the gathering of tip-top rich individuals that Joe had ended up getting to know with, and Joe was made to feel that it was himself that really got it done. Be that as it may, it wasn't the case someone had done the homicide and framed Joe because of Joe being inebriated on the night in question, which was the night that he met these rich people. He was unable to recall that whatever was said by any of them or what he shared with them, all things considered. So he was working from a fresh start, attempting to sort everything out. The individual that was known as the Eat the Rich Killer because of the victims just being wealthy individuals, and was dubious of Joe through messages, because of the way that he felt like Joe wasn't being his actual self, and he accepted that Jonathan Moore was a front, and saw that individual figured out that Joe was, truth be told, lying about his character, to such an extent that we saw articles on the wall yet were about Love, 40, even Beck from Season 1. So the killer had a lot of familiarity with Joe and was basically extorting him and undermining him. This then implied the show turned into a murder mystery about figuring out who was extorting Joe and why they were making it happen. As the episodes went on, we saw that Simon was the following victim to be killed, and afterwards Gemma was killed in the penultimate episode. Kate looked like she would have been next, because of how the killer was talking in his messages. Joe and Kate had developed increasingly close as the season had continued, to such an extent that she turned into his you. He was falling for her. Something that he said he wouldn't do, yet he was plainly gambling with everything to safeguard her. With the elites feeling that Joe was the killer after all, Kate's over-the-top long-haul companion and wannabe lover found Joe by Gemma's body. We saw him state how he planned to hurt Joe in the forest. leaving into the nobility and the attitude that we saw these rich jargon all through the whole season. Treating individuals they saw as beneath them as junk. Nonetheless, after Joe figured out how to fend off Roald, we saw a person that we hadn't seen in quite a while, Rhys, poor kid who became rich because of his book that was colossal achievement. He knocked out Joe and put him in a prison that lied underneath Phoebe's mansion in the country. Rhys was the individual who was sending Joe these messages and was behind the killings that were happening. Rhys was a person that had a grieved past and earned his abundance wealth as opposed to being born into it, similar to every other person that we saw, and as he mentioned toward the beginning of the episode. He said how he felt like people that were born with it. He was ready to watch the world be consumed, so there was a profound disdain within him from people that were evidently his companions. Which also made sense as to why he needed to run for mayor and accomplish something beneficial for people. He took an interest in Joe on the grounds that he really accepts that Joe would have the option to help him, particularly because of the friendship that they shaped right back in episode 1. With Joe in any event, expressing that Rhys was the main individual that he felt like he would have rather not kill. With Rhys keeping Roald and Joe secured, and with Joe not killing Roald like Rhys needed him to, as he wanted all the killings to be nailed to Roald. Rhys set the place ablaze and was ready to let them both burn. We saw that Joe figured out how to break free, and we really saw an alternate side to Joe. He saved Roald and broke him free from the shackles, notwithstanding the way that Roald was hunting him a matter of minutes earlier. Showing a genuine change in character, something he certainly could not have possibly do in the previous seasons. In any case, it's obvious to see that he's attempting to turn into a changed man. Something was different when he turned down Kate in the last moments of the last episode, since he would have rather not trouble her with his past, since he realized that he would hurt her. Normally he simply gets captivated and will ignore his interests' actual feelings. So the change is certainly present within the character. What occurred with Marianne most certainly transformed him. The last thing that we saw was Rhys declaring his bid for the mayor of London on television, to which it appeared like he has a high possibility winning because of his appealing to the two sides of the wealth spectrum and the regard that he appears to have. Joe will undoubtedly be hoping to uncover Rhys in the following part of Season 4, which will be fascinating to check whether he's successful in doing as such, particularly taking into account that Rhys has a lot of familiarity with Joe's actual character, that he needs to leave well enough alone. So Rhys most certainly has the advantage. I thought this initial segment of the forward season was very great. While seeing Joe back on our screens was perfect. I truly do need to say that this felt like the most unique when contrasted with any of the past seasons that we've had. It nearly felt like a nice change happened generally. The situation is reversed in that this very thing we've generally expected from the show. Yet with this season it felt like they transformed it more into a murder mystery, with Joe actually doing an occasional killing but instead zeroing in more on Joe chasing down the individual who was doing the blackmailing. There wasn't as much spotlight on Joe and his infatuation on someone and the personal side to his life, which I think we all get great enjoyment out of watching. I felt the genuine desire on figuring out who the individual behind the messages was, on the grounds that it seemed like there was a ton in stake. He needed to start over once again and be a hero for once, yet somebody was forestalling that to occur. There was no vault as well, which I believe is disgrace as it becomes inseparable from the show. Nadia's story was fascinating. She played the Paco and Delilah type role. I simply feel we'll get more of her in the second piece of the time. I enjoyed this season. It just felt very unique and not in the manner that I envisioned it working out. However, I will in any case watch the following part 2 to see if Joe's identity gets uncovered and assuming how to bring Rhys down. So that's it, you Season 4 Section 1 completion made sense of and recapped.